Hey, Bastich B here for 64K, and welcome to episode 9 of Shoot 'em Up Decades. And welcome back. And if you've never watched this show before, I take a look at 3 different shoot-em-ups from 3 different decades. It's usually a variety of different systems, but on today's episode, we're going to be having a look at 3 arcade games in particular. So let's not waste any more time and head on back to the 1980s. Exerion was released in the arcades by Jaleco in 1983 and was a fixed-screen shooter in style. Although the background scrolled giving a sense of movement, it's essentially a variation on Phoenix or Galaga, but has enough uniqueness to make it very interesting. I first encountered this game back in about 1986 at a local cafe. I used to ride there all the time on my BMX to play games. Next to it sat a Commando cabinet, but due to the fact that I played my Commodore 64 version to death, it didn't really have much interest to me, and I always chose to play Exerion instead, as there was no home ports available to me at that time to play. In the game, you control a spaceship as you blast a bunch of giant alien birds, UFOs, and other bizarre creatures that hang out over this planet's surface. You have 2 types of weapons: an unlimited double shot, shooting 2 lasers at the same time, at a much slower pace to take out most creatures, plus a rapid single stream machine gun style shot that just shreds through the enemies in quick succession. It is limited, however, and to keep it charged, every shot you hit with your single double laser shot helps recharge it, so you have to switch back and forth between both shots. And generally speaking, some shots work much better against certain enemies. Like most arcade games of this era, there's also a bonus stage where if you blast all the incoming enemies, you get an instant top-up of your rapid fire shot. The aspect that sets this game apart from everything else, though, back then was its fake 3D look that used parallax action to make it look like you were flying over the surface of a planet. But the inertia aspect of your ship was something I always really enjoyed. It felt like you were piloting something that was about to land on the moon, as you had to compensate quickly to the different enemy waves as the ship bopped about, as you laid waste to all the incoming alien scum. The game has no music, but the sound effects really sell it, coupled with the action make it a very satisfying experience, wasting everything thrown at you, with the constantly changing backgrounds and new enemy types introduced in rapid fashion. It was never boring on any level. The game actually got a number of home ports. None of them were available to me at that time, such as the Famicom MSX and SG-1000, so the arcade was the only really time I got to play this game. Upon release, it topped the Japanese arcade charts for 2 months straight at the end of 1983, and is a really cool fixed screen style shooter that has largely been forgotten, but is a must play for this subgenre.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
And now on over to the 90s, probably one of the best decades for classic shoot-em-up games. Another forgotten game by Jaleco was Desert War, released originally in 1995 in the arcades. It was a unique combination of 90s-style vertical shoot-em-up mixed with Broderbund's computer classic Choplifter, as you had to blast your way across the battlefield in your giant rescue helicopter, picking up POWs and other stranded soldiers and taking them back to bases for safety. The game is definitely a bit jarring the first time you play it, as you expect the screen to be scrolling and enemies to be coming in fast and furious, but that's not the case. case. You're in control of the movement of the screen and the pace of the game, with the enemies generally attacking in waves. You have a map to the right of the screen indicating where the POWs are, and landing pads are indicated with X's. One of the main things that you have to account for though is your fuel, which is constantly running down. Picking up POWs give you small fuel boosts, as well as many of them have weapon upgrades to boost your firepower, as the enemies go from mindless tanks to powerful gunships and jets. You also don't die from a single shot, which is good, and can take a few hits based on your armor in the top left corner of the screen. It's a pretty chaotic mix of action that feels very different from most shooters back then. I like the inclusion also of the 3 different difficulty levels that each have their own set of stages, therefore completely different scenarios, and are definitely worth exploring for a whole bunch of more varied gameplay. Sound effects, graphics, and music all do a great job, and overall gameplay is very satisfying and quite addictive, with a decent amount of strategy if you want to see every level to the end and take out those giant boss vehicles. It's a fine-tuned game that came out when everything was switching over to 3D in the arcades and got completely overlooked. But seek it out. It's a great mid-90s arcade hidden gem. And now on over to the 2000s for our final game. Dragon Blaze hit the arcades by Sekio in 2000, one of the kings of the shooter genre. Most of the games, at least for me, always strayed that fine line between shoot 'em up and bullet hell, but Dragon Blaze just fully embraces the latter, giving you a full-on chaotic shoot fest in a fantasy world setting. The game came out at a time when most people simply didn't go to arcades anymore. Japan's arcade scene was still going strong, but most other countries, console gaming had completely wiped out these establishments, and hence a lot of people probably missed this game. It's a pretty standard vertically scrolling shooter for the most part, with you able to pick from 4 different heroes, all who ride on the backs of dragons, and each having their own basic shooting style variations, smart bombs, and the ability to shoot your dragon off literally like a spear to smash through enemies and being able to call them back at will. The game features 7 stages, which are randomized for the first 4, giving you a chance of playing a new level when starting each time, which is always interesting, and the last 3 play out in the same order each time. Each character you choose has their own unique story as well, adding to the game's replay value. Learning how to use your dragon's launching shot effectively is key to survival, and survival is what you'll be trying to achieve in this game, as it's pretty damn hard. It's definitely not for anyone but veterans of the genre, and it'll kill you very quickly like an early 80s arcade game. It was released near the end of Sekio's run, as the company shut their doors 2 games later. It sports very good graphics, with a vast amount of boss encounters with multiple forms to each one, making them very challenging to take down, and some pretty good music and sound effects to complement out the package. It's not quite as memorable as some of the other more well-known classics, but its relative obscurity, at least on the mainstream radar, make it a fun look for fans of Sekio's special brand of shoot 'em up action. And that's it for another episode. Thanks for joining me, Bastich B at 64K. I hope you had a good time, and if you can please like and subscribe, that'll be greatly appreciated, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.